Welcome to the Week 9 edition of the Draft Report. My name is Matt Brown. This is brought to you by DFSReport.com. Be sure and head over there and get all of your Week 9 NFL information. We even have some NHL stuff going up. We have some MMA stuff for UFC 217 that's going on. They got some big contests going on over there as well. So we definitely want you to head on over and take in all of those picks and plays articles. Be sure and head to your favorite app store as well and download the Draft app. When you do that, use the promo code REPORT, REPORT, and you will get a free entry to a $3 contest upon your first deposit. Everybody loves free money, so be sure and do that. We start this off with a little bit of sad news. Man, Deshaun Watson goes down earlier today. This is Thursday when we are taping this. Earlier today, he goes down with an ACL injury, going to miss the rest of the season. The guy was cruising to Rookie of the Year, maybe even a dark horse MVP candidate. That Texans offense was flying, and he goes down with a non-contact injury at practice. Turns out to be a torn ACL. He's going to be out, which is a complete and utter bummer. Got to hate that for Deshaun Watson. We also find out that Andrew Luck is going to be out for the season as well. If you have been tuning in to a lot of the information we've been putting out on DFS Report, we kind of predicted this, that anytime a quarterback keeps getting pushed back, and then they won't give you any sort of definitive answer of when they think he's going to be back, it seems like things were a little worse off than they were letting it be known to the public. And sure enough, that's the case. And they're just going to shut Andrew Luck down for the foreseeable future. So hopefully he gets well as well. Franchise type quarterback guy when he is healthy. But the guys we can play this week, another 6 teams on bye. So our pool is going to be pretty low. Let's start with the guys that we hate so that we don't even have to worry about this. Listen, Flacco, Manning, Dalton, CJ Beathard, Brock Osweiler, Drew Stanton, Jay Cutler, Tom Savage. All of these guys are off the table. We're not playing any of these guys whatsoever. So there's no need in any form that you play on draft where you would ever need to play any of those guys. Don't get cute. The upside's not there. The floor's not there. There's nothing you want. There's definitely 10 guys out there that you could play this week, even if you're in a 10-team league on draft, that would be a much better prospect than any of those people that I just listed. So now with Watson being gone, I think there's 3 guys that really top the list here: Russell Wilson, Drew Brees, and Dak Prescott. Let's start with Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson at home against Washington. Washington just all kinds of banged up. I mean, offensive side of the ball, defensive side of the ball, everywhere you look, this Washington team can't keep it together here. And what we saw with Seattle now, while the defense gave up a lot of points to Deshaun Watson and his dynamic play style, this offense on the other side, man, they are really, really getting it going here. Russell Wilson just lit it up last week, going all over the place to all kinds of different receivers. Now, not much rush game to speak from, but that's okay. I mean, listen, we're not gonna worry about the rush game there. We're going to continue to focus on the pass game here. So Russell Wilson, one of the top plays of the week for sure. Dak Prescott, with the loss of Ezekiel Elliott due to suspension, he's going to be asked to do more stuff this week. He's going to you have to shoulder more of the load there. Going up against a Kansas City team that actually, shockingly, you think Kansas City and you think pretty good defense, but it's actually not the case with the Kansas City team so far this year. So definitely a Kansas City team that we're going to look to kind of pick on here because they're kind of getting in sneaky shootouts. I mean, the offense is good in Kansas City, so it forces the other team to score some points as well. So certainly like him. Now let's talk about Drew Brees. Drew Brees going up against the Tampa Bay Bucks this week. We've talked ad nauseum about how much this Tampa Bay Bucks team is underperforming and what we think about this Tampa Bay Bucks team. Now we look at this team, might be down their 2 starting corners yet again. They were both out last week. Maybe one gets back in there this week. Even so, there's likely to be down at least 1 starting cornerback. So we love that anyway. Drew Brees, don't have to tell you his resume at home in the Superdome. It is much, much better than on the road. Loves being on that fast track. His teammates love being on that fast track, and he just loves the atmosphere playing well there. Now, another thing to love about the Saints, highest implied team total of the week at 28.75 points. So that means they are projected to score over 4 touchdowns in this game. You got to think that Drew Brees is going to be good for at least a couple of those. What makes this such a great matchup here? Tampa Bay last DVOA versus the pass. So we're stripping some factors out. We're trying to put an even playing field here, which is what DVOA does. And they are last versus the pass in the NFL. Tampa has also allowed at least 20 fantasy points to quarterbacks in 4 of the last 6 games. So Drew Brees here, as good a bet as any to get you 20 fantasy points this week and maybe an upside of 25 plus. Now I'll talk about how Kansas City as a team has kind of been scoring a lot of points. Their offense has been pretty dang good, and kind of an under the radar guy is Alex Smith, who has been just getting it done, guys. I mean, you don't love to click Alex Smith. He's not a sexy pick. And a lot of times we've been falling with this deal with Alex Smith where, oh, he's a game manager. That's all he does. That's all he's good for. Let's not worry about him. And then you look at these game logs here where you see this guy has, a 293-yard game, a 368-yard game, a 324-yard game, and a 342-yard game already this season. So you can see the type of upside when you've got a Travis Kelce on that team, when you got a Kareem Hunt on that team, where, this opens it up for a guy like Alex Smith and gives you a little bit of rushing upside as well. He's not afraid to take off and run for a first down if need be. Tyreek Hill, obviously the big burner there for him as well. Like me some Alex Smith this week. The real question this week, I think, at the quarterback position is going to come with Carson Wentz, who's just having, an MVP season, probably leading for me as far as the season goes for MVP so far. But he gets a Denver team here that, while they've been giving up yards and they've been giving up some points here, it's typically because it's coming late in the game when they've just been on the field so much, because this Denver offense has been so putrid. It's just 3 and out after 3 and out after 3 and out after 3 and out. And what you see and what happens is the defense starts to wear down towards the end of the game. And that's what's been going on. Now, if you expect that to happen again, and I don't see any reason why it would not, they're going to Brock Osweiler in this game, who certainly has not proven that he can do anything with any sort of team. If you believe that that's going to be the case yet again, well then, hey, go right ahead. Carson Wentz should be able to feast mid to late third quarter on into the fourth quarter there. Cam Newton, one of my sneaky starts of the week. I think he's going to be okay even without Kelvin Benjamin in town there. And listen, they've been running the ball with him. We're talking about a guy that's getting 7, 8, 9 carries here over the last few games. And that's what we love about Cam Newton. We love the rushing upside. He just needs to get in the end zone one time rushing for us and then throw for a couple and 200 yards. And we are well on our way to a big, big score for the week. On to the running back position here in week 9, right off of the bat. Whenever you look at the teams that are on bye, you're going to see some names that are not normally at the top that are not at the top this week. You're also going to see a name that's not at the top because he's suspended. Ezekiel Elliott was no longer going to be playing this week, so we have to look elsewhere. So that leaves us with Todd Gurley as the number 1 running back play on the week this week, going up against a New York Giants team that looks like they've just packed it in. I mean, you've got cornerbacks not showing up on time and getting suspended 2 of the last 3 weeks now. Just looks like they've totally packed it in since they lost Odell Beckham, Brandon Marshall, and everything like that. So for me, looks like a team that basically ready for this offseason to get here. And so Todd Gurley should certainly feast here. We're talking about a guy that's getting all the volume. I mean, it doesn't even matter how efficient Todd Gurley is so far in this season, because whenever you get as much volume as he's getting and basically no competition for carries aside of the crazy little jet sweeps here and there with Tavon Austin, that you really have to worry about when it comes to Todd Gurley. So love Todd Gurley this week. Will be my number 1 running back that I go out and try to pick up in all my drafts. Talked about this Kansas City team, Kareem Hunt. He got held to under 100 yards total offense from scrimmage for the first time in his whole career last week against this Denver defense. So not a thing to really worry about there with Kareem Hunt. He gets back on track this week against Dallas. Certainly, again, one of the top plays. Don't need to sell you on him. I don't need to tell you about Leonard Fournette here. Again, strictly one of those volume play guys as well. Doesn't really matter the matchup for Leonard Fournette at this point because they're giving him so many carries, all the red zone looks. This guy is getting everything for this team in Jacksonville. Got a week off to get healthy with that ankle. He's going to roll this week. Both running backs in the Saints situation is great. I love what they're doing down there in New Orleans with this offense right now. They're not putting everything on Drew Brees. They are giving him some help with the run game. And the other thing is with these guys are both catching passes. It doesn't matter if it's Mark Ingram or Alvin Kamara. Both of these guys are catching passes there for Drew Brees. So not only are they getting all the running action between those two guys, and a lot of that going to Mark Ingram, a little bit more of the pass catching stuff going to Kamara, but both guys have upside this week, and both your guys that I'm going to be targeting probably is my Ingram is an RB1 this week, and Kamara is an RB2 this week whenever I'm looking at filling my lineups in on draft. Another guy that we're going to look at pretty hard is Lamar Miller. Lamar Miller going up against Indianapolis this week. And listen, we just mentioned the Deshaun Watson news, and that is obviously a big bummer here. Maybe a small tick down for him because obviously if the offense is rolling and completely rolling, it's going to be more scoring opportunities for Lamar Miller. Certainly not going to get that with Tom Savage. That being said, you can't really argue with the numbers here. The volume that Lamar Miller is getting is there. I mean, he's getting 19.6 touches per game. And when you're getting 19.6 touches per game against a Colts defense that's 30th DVOA versus the run and 32nd DVOA versus pass catching running backs, that is exactly the type of matchup that we're looking for whenever we're talking about a guy like Lamar Miller. And again, a little bit of a tick down here because obviously you want your quarterback to be moving the ball up and down the field for you and create more red zone opportunities for you and more chances for you to get in the end zone. That said, he's still being used to the pass game as well. And I think Tom Savage will still look his way. We're talking about over his last 4 games, 4, 2, 3, and 3 receptions as well for Lamar Miller, getting into the end zone a couple of times over that time span as well through receiving touchdowns, not even rushing touchdowns for Lamar Miller there. So listen, certainly not as high on him as I was earlier in the week before this injury, but still think he has a decent amount of upside, and I still will be targeting Lamar Miller this week. And again, when you factor in a lot of the other things that are happening this week with the Monday Night Football game not being on the main slate and then the 6 other teams that are on bye, you got to be looking Lamar Miller's way. Christian McCaffrey is a guy that now, whenever with Kelvin Benjamin out of town there for Carolina, you have to think that Christian McCaffrey is going to have an even bigger role there in Carolina, that they'll be looking his way even more than they already are against an Atlanta defense that has been very disappointing so far this year. So I certainly think Christian McCaffrey is a guy that's going to see an uptick this week. Another guy that I don't like clicking on, but you have to this week whenever you just look at everything that's going on, is Adrian Peterson at home, off of a bye. He got to rest those old knees of his. He got to drink the Ensure, and he had all the 5 o'clock Denny's dinners and everything like Applebee's that he could have with his old man Fitz friend. And his old legs and old ankles and knees are going to do okay at home against San Francisco. It's just such a good matchup here. And again, talking about Carson Palmer going down for the season, they're going to have to rely on Adrian Peterson. They're not going to let Drew Stanton go out there and just go crazy, especially when they don't have to, whenever you have a San Francisco team that can be had on the ground as well. So Adrian Peterson probably looking at 20 plus carries this week, I would think, and a viable option. You know, listen, we have to look where we're going to get the volume, and we're going to get volume with him. So he's got to be a viable option this week. A guy that I'm not going to be on that I was on heavily last week is Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon at Jacksonville. This Jacksonville defense is just legit. They are for real. And plus, they're going to grind Leonard Fournette. They're going to have long drives. It's going to wear the game down. I don't even know how many possessions Cincinnati is even going to have in this game and give Joe Mixon the chance to really go off in this game. So we're trying to win these tournaments. We're not trying to eke by. We're not trying to eke into the money. We're trying to win these things. And to win these things, we need upside. I don't think Joe Mixon brings that to the table this week. Some sneaky upside that's kind of gross that you're going to have to click on is Orleans Darkwa. I mean, listen, Orleans Darkwa at home against LA. And while I said the Giants team has packed it in, they certainly have, but he's been given the keys here to the car, and the car might be, you know, a 1982 Honda Accord. But that being said, you still have the keys to the car. And, you know, if there is a leak for this Rams team, it's their run defense. And so Orleans Darkwa, if he's going to get all the carries against a team that has one weakness, which is the run defense, this is something that we're going to have to look to this week. So here we go yet again. And another guy that, listen, if he falls to me at the right point, I don't love it. But Kenyon Drake is, now that Jay Ajayi has been shipped out of town, Kenyon Drake is a starting running back there, at least seems to be the starting running back there in Miami, going up against an Oakland team that can be had on the ground and through the air. This Oakland defense has just been absolutely putrid, ranking in the bottom third, basically every single statistical category that there is on the defensive metrics. So another guy that you're not going to love to click on, but Kenyon Drake likely to get a lot of workload against a bad defense. Looking at wideouts here for week 9, and I say wideouts, it is pass catchers at draft. You can have tight ends if you want to. Typically in any given week, there's only a couple of tight ends that really have the upside that we're looking for. You know, Travis Kelce, basically a wide receiver playing tight end. When Gronk's on the slate, of course, he's always viable. Jimmy Graham seems to be getting more involved there in Seattle. If that continues, certainly a guy that could win you a tournament in any given week. But typically we're staying to wide receivers. They typically have the higher floor. They typically have the higher ceiling as well. So these are the guys that we try to roster on draft. But again, don't hate a Travis Kelce play. Certainly don't ever hate a Gronk play. If Jimmy Graham keeps up being the way that Jimmy Graham is, then by all means. And of course, Zach Ertz is just scoring touchdowns at an unbelievable rate. They love throwing him in the red zone there for the Eagles. So wouldn't hate that play either, but those tend to be in deeper drafts. So just keep that in mind. So looking at the wide receiver position this week, Michael Thomas tops the list here. Told you how much I love Drew Brees, so I got to love his number one pass catcher here. This Tampa Bay team likely to be without their top two cornerbacks. And even if they get one of them back, I still think Michael Thomas has a good day this week. This is going to be a top play of mine, a guy that I'm going to be targeting a lot. Julio Jones, another guy that I'll be targeting, despite the fact that they really just can't figure out what the hell to do there in Atlanta with their guys. I mean, they have so much talent and can't score the ball like they should be able to. Steve Sarkisian's got to get his proverbial stuff together over there in Atlanta and figure out how to take advantage of all this wealth of talent that he's got. But Julio Jones against Carolina here. Carolina's front seven, real stout, but you can pass on this team. I think that, Julio Jones certainly has as much upside as anyone this week. If I like the New Orleans side, and I think that New Orleans is going to score a lot, then that means Tampa Bay is going to have to abandon the run, and they're going to have to start passing every single down. That makes me like Mike Evans. Now, listen, Mike Evans is basically matchup proof. We talked about this last week. They're forcing him targets anyway. But if we think the game script is going to go and the game flow is going to go like we think, where New Orleans gets ahead a lot and they have to abandon the run, we might be looking at a dozen plus targets here for Mike Evans. So certainly someone that I'm going to have on my short list. DeAndre Hopkins would have been the number one overall wide receiver for me this week going up against this Indianapolis team. I mean, they are literally in the bottom against every single position, bottom five when it comes to every single position in defensive metrics. But with Tom Savage, I just don't know how much upside we can look at with DeAndre Hopkins. Now, listen, if he falls to us in a spot we feel comfortable, for sure. I just don't want to overdraft here. We're not taking him with one of our first picks because, again, we're talking about the upside that Tom Savage can bring. And, I mean, this guy couldn't even last a game before they decided he wasn't an NFL quarterback. So this is a really bad situation for all of these pass catchers there in Houston. One of the guys I will be reaching for, however, is Dez Bryant. Dez Bryant at home against Kansas City here. Now, I talk about how Kansas City's offense can move the ball. And if Kansas City's offense can move the ball, then I think we're kind of looking at a sneaky shootout here. And, I say sneaky shootout, although the total's posted at 50 and a half, depending on where you look in this game. So, I mean, Vegas certainly thinks that, but I wonder what the public is going to think. I wonder if people are going to see that Zeke is out and basically just try to abandon this game. Well, if that's the case, bad for them, good for us. And look, here's the thing. Dez Bryant has all what we're looking for here. A good high total, so there's going to be points scored in the game. A matchup against the Chiefs. They're the 28th ranked team in adjusted fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. And again, we think the Chiefs defense, and we've always thought of this team as a real stout defense, and that's just not the case this year, giving up a lot of points and giving up a lot of yardage to wide receivers. Another thing we love about Dez Bryant, he is first in the NFL in red zone targets. What does that mean for us? That means he is getting opportunities to score, and that is what we look for. We need our guys to get in the end zone, and Dez Bryant is getting more than anyone in the NFL opportunities to score for us. And look, we're probably going to get an uptick in that as well with Zeke being out. Zeke is a massive red zone threat whenever they get down there. But with him being out, is it going to be Alfred Morris? Is it going to be, is it going to be Darren McFadden? No, it's not going to be those guys. It's going to be Dez Bryant. So Dez Bryant, I think, is tons and tons of upside this week, and a guy that I'm going to be basically trying to get on every one of my draft teams if I can possibly do it. I talk about Russell Wilson, how much I love Russell Wilson this week, so I got to love his number one wide receiver. Now, we were on Doug Baldwin last week, and unfortunately, the way that went, everyone else had a huge day except for Doug Baldwin. That's not going to be the case week in and week out. Doug Baldwin is going to have his massive games as well. I think Doug Baldwin bounces back pretty big here against Washington, because even if Josh Norman is out there, Josh Norman's not going to be going into the slot where Doug Baldwin runs a lot of his routes. And so I think we're pretty good there with him. Michael Crabtree and Amari Cooper. What do we do here? I mean, the matchup is beautiful against this Miami Dolphins team that's been getting torched left and right. The problem is we can't count on these guys week in, week out. I mean, it is up and down and up and down with all of their production. My best advice would be maybe play like 3 or 4 drafts this week and get one with Cooper, one with Crabtree, and then one without either one of them, one with and another without either one of them. Because I certainly don't want to tell you, yes, definitely go all in on Crabtree and then it becomes a Cooper week, or go all in on Cooper, it's a Crabtree week, or for some strange reason, both of them bust out. So for me, I'll probably have exposure to both guys, but I'm certainly not all in on either one of the guys this week. On the other side of the ball there in that same game, Jarvis Landry is a guy that I probably will have a decent amount of exposure to with Jay Cutler back under center. One things we saw is he was peppering Jarvis Landry with targets left and right when he was under center for this team. And yet another thing to look at is Jarvis Landry is actually getting red zone looks. One of the things we hated about Jarvis Landry forever in DFS was the fact that he would have 8 or 10 catches and you look down and you're like, why is he not scoring me fantasy points? What is going on here? And the thing is he just was never getting in the end zone, but they're actually looking at him in the red zone so far this year. So certainly someone that I'm going to be looking at. T.Y. Hilton, off of a complete stinker, gets to bounce back at home against this Houston defense that, as you saw, just got absolutely lit up by Seattle last week. I think Jacoby Brissett can play a little bit, and I think T.Y. Hilton here, especially at the cost you're going to be able to get him. I mean, everyone's going to be off this guy after a horrible, horrible week, so you could probably get him in the last round of your draft if you wanted to. So certainly somebody that I'm going to be looking at. Larry Fitzgerald coming off of a bye, so he got to rest his old legs like we talked about with Adrian Peterson. Drew Stanton, likely not going to be bombing it downfield. I mean, that doesn't seem to be his forte. You got to think he's going to play it safe and go to the guy that he knows and trusts and everything like that. And they've actually played together, Drew Stanton, in his limited, field time that he's had there for the Cardinals. He's thrown a couple touchdown passes to Larry Fitzgerald even. So Larry Fitzgerald is a guy that if he falls to me at the right spot, or if I'm kind of digging here to try to win a week, certainly somebody that I have no problem with you guys rostering whatsoever. Devin Funchess has now become the number 1 receiver in Carolina. If you believe that Carolina is going to score in this Atlanta game, maybe has sneaky shootout potential, which I do, then Devin Funchess is going to be a big part of that. Certainly a guy to consider. Will Fuller now just kind of falls off the chart for me. I mean, he was not a volume guy anyway. He was relying on, the big arm from Watson, the playmaking ability from Watson. He was relying on scoring touchdowns. So for me, Will Fuller kind of falls completely off of the chart for me, as does Demaryius Thomas against Philadelphia. Philadelphia defense been pretty good. And again, Brock Osweiler is under center. So you tell me how Brock Osweiler, I mean, he got thrown out of Houston, got thrown out of Cleveland, and now is back in Denver. And they're only going to him because Trevor Siemian has been quite literally one of the worst quarterbacks in the entire league. So I certainly don't want to have to go there. Certainly nobody that I'm going to be reaching for at all. One of the guys that a little bit further down the list, though, if you're looking for some names that may have some sneaky potential here to get it done for us this week, I think Golden Tate. I actually think Green Bay is going to be able to score on Detroit now that Hundley's had a week to kind of get his sea legs underneath him with a bye week and everything like that. I think Green Bay is going to be able to play. And with that, I think Detroit's going to have to keep their foot on the gas here. I think Golden Tate is certainly a guy to be looking at. And I think Jordy Nelson got to rest, got to get, some practice time with Hundley. I think Jordy Nelson is also a guy that could help us this week in our drafts. Okay, guys, that's going to do it for our Week 9 look at the plays and fades over on draft. Be sure and head to dfsreport.com for all of your DFS needs. You're going to have NBA plays, NHL plays. We've got UFC 217 plays, and, of course, we got the football plays as well. And head to your app store and download the Draft app. And when you do, be sure and use the promo code REPORT, REPORT, and you'll get a free $3 entry to a contest upon your first deposit. Listen, Draft is a great new way to play DFS. It's just an add-on to your salary cap DFS that you're already playing. You don't have to choose one or the other. It's completely different. And so it's just a new, awesome, fun way to play DFS. I hope you give it a try, and I hope you like it. I'll be back in Week 10 for everything that has to do with all of the Week 10 news and injuries and picks and plays and fades right here on the DFS Report. My name is Matt Brown. See you in Week 10.